G'day everyone and welcome to my first video on this little channel I call Home Drive-In, where I bring you retrospectives, reviews and other assorted videos based mostly on horror films and some science fiction. I am kind of doing this without a roadmap, so we'll just wait and see what happens. But today for our Kickstarter, I will be discussing that oddball little film known as Tourist Trap. Tourist Trap was released in 1979 and tells the story of a group of young people on a road trip. When their car breaks down, they're assisted by the seemingly innocuous Mr. Slauson, who offers them shelter in his nearby museum, a roadside tourist attraction that features an array of lifelike mannequins. However, the group soon discovers that Slauson's exhibits appear to be a little too believable, and while a mysterious stranger in a mask, with apparent telekinesis no less, begins to stalk the new arrivals. Tourist Trap seems to be combining elements of Halloween with the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, House of Wax and a little dash of Carrie sprinkled in because why not? What sounds like a potential recipe for disaster actually just kind of works. Tourist Trap has an eerie setting, a twisted sense of humour and some truly unsettling moments. And let's face it, mannequins are by nature just plain creepy. I mean, look at these guys. They're up to something. Tourist Trap was co-written by Larry Carroll and director David Schmoeller, who wanted to make a feature-length version of his thesis film, The Spider Will Kill You, about a blind man living in an attic who falls in love with his only friend, a female mannequin. The idea of mannequins came to the director after seeing some bizarre figures in a shopping mall. While younger mannequins would appear to be missing just one or two facial features, but as they got progressively older, they had no recognisable features at all. Schmoeller was also inspired by an episode of The Twilight Zone and the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and considering he was brought up and educated in Texas, that was hardly surprising. Schmoeller originally offered the film to director John Carpenter, who had directed Halloween the year before, yet when a financial agreement couldn't be reached, it was decided that he would direct the film himself. Tourist Trap was also the first feature film for many of its cast, including the late Tanya Roberts, whose agent insisted that she meet with the director, who immediately cast her in the role of Becky. Jocelyn Jones, the daughter of the late actor Henry Jones, plays Molly, who you could safely call the introvert of the group before emerging as the film's heroine. Which, for those paying attention to the horror genre, would know that became something of a trope. The role of Mr. Slauson had originally been offered to other actors such as Jack Palance and Gig Young, yet the part was ultimately given to Chuck Connors, who got his big break in the TV series The Rifleman after trading in a successful baseball career. Connors accepted the role as he was keen to make his mark as a movie villain, much like a Boris Karloff for the 1970s, and as a result his performance is a standout. Rounding out the cast is John Van Ness as Becky's husband Jerry, Robin Sherwood as the inquisitive Eileen, Keith McDermott as Woody in a brief scene as the movie's first victim, and Dawn Jeffrey as Tina, whom, for those of you who've already seen this film, would probably remember her for her death scene that does give new definition to the term getting plastered. Horror icon Linnea Quigley also appears uncredited as a mannequin, and if you can tell me what scene she's in, you're doing a much better job than I am. Tourist Trap was filmed primarily in Los Angeles County with some added interiors at Rampant Sound Studios. Filming also took place at an abandoned house on Hollywood Boulevard after the director had convinced the contractors to hold off demolishing the property by a week or so they could film some interior footage, thus trimming the film's budget by nearly $30,000 in construction costs. Tourist Trap was produced by horror producer Charles Band and his at the time self-titled studio. Filmed over 24 days on a budget of $300,000, distributed by Compass International Pictures, who had also released John Carpenter's Halloween the year before. Being the first film for many of the cast and crew, there was a lot of collaboration on set, with a range of different working styles coming together, harmoniously for the most part, maybe not so in others. Jocelyn Jones would adopt a rather methodical approach when getting into character, which included some breathing exercises before shooting, much to the confusion of Chuck Connors, who, being self-taught, was unused to Jones's preparation routine. Tanya Roberts would also apply her own method acting. During a chase scene, she insisted on running through the woods in bare feet, resulting in them becoming injured, thus reducing her to tears and making that scene all the more believable. David Schmoeller was also dealing with his own inexperience on set, yet was given a lot of support from his colleagues, especially Jocelyn Jones, who frequently offered him guidance on dealing with actors, and as such the two would go on to form a solid friendship. Connors too would offer his own advice, yet would occasionally push his luck with the new director. Standing tall at 6'6", he at one point towered over the new director, pretending to pick a fight with him, before walking away chuckling to himself. It was all in good fun, I'm sure. Schmoeller had also been a little apprehensive to mention the subject of nudity, since a waterfall scene originally called for Sherwood, Roberts and Jones to undress. Shortly before filming the scene, he finally brought the subject up, yet the unanimous response from his leading ladies was a resounding,
"I don't think you should."
Sorry guys. Art director Robert Burns, famous for creating the sets for the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, worked on the set design and various effects for this film, using several inventive techniques to bring Schmoeller's bizarre world to life. In the opening sequence, the character of Woody finds himself trapped in a room of laughing mannequins. While trying to escape, a cabinet across the room appears to come to life, throwing random objects at him. The method of filming this scene was not new at the time, but nonetheless clever. Both the camera and room would be tilted at a 90-degree angle with the cabinet facing down, while a crew member simply dropped the objects from above. Similar techniques would be used in such films as A Nightmare on Elm Street and Poltergeist, yet on a far grander scale. Burns also created the numerous mannequin effects for the movie, including mechanical figures whose jaws would open and eyes would move. Simple techniques that may well have been done by CGI today, but not been nearly as impactful. Hey, I'm not dissing CGI, it's just hard to get these things right.
See my friend?
Acclaimed Italian composer Pino Donaggio, who had produced the music for larger productions such as Carrie, was approached by David Schmoeller to do the score. The two met while Donaggio was composing the themes for Joe Dante's film Piranha, with Schmoeller acting as an interpreter since Donaggio spoke very little English. Donaggio agreed to participate and they recorded the film's score in Rome, and while it cost the production 1/6 of the film's overall budget, the crew still felt very fortunate to have him involved. However, distributor Irwin Yablans from Compass International seemingly wasn't too fond of the music, feeling its quirkiness detracted from the otherwise dark nature of the film. It seemed he would have preferred a score that was more akin to John Carpenter's music for Halloween.
Woody?
Nonetheless, the music would go on to be very well received, as it does elevate the film. It's haunting, often moving, and at times downright bizarre, complementing the tone of the film perfectly. Tourist Trap makes a number of ingenious moves with its simple premise, taking steps beyond the general slasher genre by introducing some fairly likeable characters, despite being made up of the usual horror movie archetypes. It also makes expert use of its isolated setting, while the mannequins only add to the uncanny nightmare the characters find themselves in. Splice in the music that almost surpasses the quality of the film itself, interwoven with a dark sense of humour.
Eileen, don't go out there.
Being born in the early days of the emerging slasher subgenre, it isn't fair to call out any faults too harshly, yet it does contain what would become its fair share of cliches, including that convenient plot device of having its characters make some not-so-smart decisions. However, the director claims that Tourist Trap is intended to unfold like a nightmare, with logic often taking a back seat, and for the most part we can forgive the film for this, despite the fact you might find yourself asking just who the real dummies are. I'm not keeping that in. Will I keep it in? I'll keep it in. Clichés aside, there's enough ingenuity to keep a horror fan seated for 90 minutes, with comedic touches effectively balancing the scares, making the audience feel uneasy while finding themselves awkwardly chuckling in the process.
Every year, hundreds of young people travel the country and disappear. God help those who get caught in The Tourist Trap.
Tourist Trap reached cinemas in the US in March of 1979 after inexplicably being branded with a PG rating, apparently due to the absence of any real graphic violence. The rating contributed to its commercial failure, considering that most moviegoers aren't going to go and see a PG-rated horror film. The film also went on to receive some mixed reviews, with some critics pointing out its cliches, while others would critique its pacing. It did, however, receive commendation for its atmosphere and musical score. Author Stephen King, however, praised the film. In his book Danse Macabre, he cited Tourist Trap as being one of his favourite low-budget horror films. Hey, and you just can't argue with the king. Tourist Trap didn't exactly propel many of its cast to superstardom. However, Tanya Roberts would famously go on to star as Julie Rogers in Charlie's Angels a couple of years later. She also appeared in several films, including as Stacey Sutton in A View to a Kill, yet was more recently recognisable as Midge in That 70s Show. Ms. Roberts sadly passed away in January of 2021 due to sepsis resulting from a urinary tract infection. Jocelyn Jones would go on to teach acting at the Beverly Hills Playhouse before starting her own acting studio, while Chuck Connors would also appear in several TV shows and films before his unfortunate death in 1992 from lung cancer. David Schmoeller would go on to direct several horror films over the following years, often collaborating again with producer Charles Band, including on the more mainstream Killer Doll film series, Puppet Master. These guys really like their dolls, don't they? Art director Robert Burns would go on to work on such films as The Howling and Reanimator, yet sadly took his own life in 2004 upon discovering he had kidney cancer. He was 60 years old. Despite doing poorly at the cinema, Tourist Trap would eventually develop its fan base. Ironically, the PG rating allowed the film to be aired on Saturday afternoons, where it finally found an audience. Tourist Trap would then develop a cult following when released on home video. In 1998, a 20th anniversary edition of the film was released on DVD by Cult Video, and includes an informative interview and commentary by the director. However, the subsequent Blu-ray releases by Full Moon in the US and 88 Films in the UK has caused some controversy due to missing 5 minutes of footage. The reason behind the censored release seems to remain unclear. Charles Band claims he doesn't know why a shortened version of the film was submitted for the Blu-ray, while Schmoeller appears to have a different perspective. I have provided links in the description that explains in more detail, including a Facebook post by the director and a description of the missing scenes. Thankfully, however, in November of 2020, the uncut edition was released by Full Moon Features on DVD and Blu-ray, which includes a new featurette with the director and commentary. And while I've heard mixed reviews on the transfer, it appears to be the definitive version currently available. Tourist Trap is also available for streaming on Shudder as well as Amazon Prime in certain regions. Also available on Prime is a version of the film from the gang at Riff Tracks, featuring an amusing commentary that sheds some light on the film's more ridiculous elements. I did watch this recently in preparation for this retrospective, and as seriously as I take my horror films, it's hilarious. Give it a look. The soundtrack was originally released in 1979 by Varese Sarah Band, with subsequent re-releases on CD by Full Moon and eventually a new vinyl release from Waxwork Records, as well as digital services including iTunes. All releases contain 25 tracks and are well worth a listen.
It's time. The party's over.
Tourist Trap is an underrated film that is certainly far more watchable than many of the other cut-and-paste slasher films to follow in the early 80s, with above-average performances, a sinister tone, and a warped sense of humour. It's readily available, so you might want to check it out, because they just don't make them like this anymore. Thanks a bunch for watching my channel, guys. Of course, I want to bring you as many videos as humanly possible, yet since these retrospectives do take quite a while to research and create, I'll also bring you some other content, be it film reviews, list videos, and so forth. And while these retrospectives will be the heart and soul of this channel, there is always room for spontaneity. Or as a wise archaeologist once said,
I don't know, I'm making this up as I go.
That said, I would love to climb that ever turbulent ladder that is YouTube, and you guys can help me out with that by leaving a comment, like, share, subscribe, you know the drill. I will be back shortly with another video, but until then, be good to yourselves and each other. I'll see you next time.